And this is why people vote for Trump. They say in politics, liberals are the gas pedal and conservatives are the brakes. And I'm generally with the gas pedal, but not if we're driving off a cliff. On the trans issue, America is no ands, ifs, or buts about it, absolutely alone in the world now, an outlier country. Last month, England's National Health Service announced that there's not enough evidence to support the safety or clinical effectiveness of puberty blockers for third graders.
For years, the woke left have treated Canada like their glittering utopia. A frosty liberal snow globe they believe America should desperately try to imitate. But not everyone's sipping that maple-flavored Kool-Aid, and Bill Maher certainly isn't. In a razor-sharp episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, the comedian torched that northern fantasy in a no-holds-barred monologue. Buckle up, this one burns.
Canada was where every woke white college kid wearing pajama pants outdoors who'd had it up to here with America's racist patriarchy dreamt of living someday. I mean, besides Gaza. There's only one problem with thinking everything's better in Canada. It's not. Not anymore, anyway. Last year, Canada added 1.3 million people, which is a lot in 1 year, the equivalent of the U.S. adding 11 million migrants in 1 year. And now they're experiencing a housing crisis even worse than ours. And we're sleeping in tents.
Maher wastes no time ripping into the woke left's sugar-coated fantasy of Canada. First on his hit list, the country's housing catastrophe, fueled by the same wide-open immigration policies that America's progressives drool over like it's some golden ticket to utopia. In reality, Canada is staring down a massive shortfall of 3.5 million homes by 2030, a crisis so deep it makes California look like a real estate paradise. Even now, more than 1 in 5 Canadian households are bleeding over 30% of their income just to keep a roof overhead. Yet somehow, the woke crowd still waves Canada around like it's the promised land. Maher doesn't just poke fun at that illusion, he incinerates it.
The median price of a home here is $346,000. In Canada, converted to US dollars, it's $487,000. If Barbie moved to Winnipeg, she wouldn't be able to afford her dream house, and Ken would be working at Tim Hortons.
Housing in Canada isn't just expensive, it's brutal. The numbers alone are enough to make your jaw drop. The average home runs between $500,000 and $540,000, and in cities like Vancouver or Toronto, prices rocket well past $750,000, often crossing the $1 million USD mark without breaking a sweat. Compare that to the US, where the typical home sits closer to $350,000 to $400,000. And suddenly Canada's dream starts looking more like a nightmare. The woke left loves to gush about copying Canada's grand blueprint. But let's be honest, most can't even afford life in America as it is. Slap Canadian-level housing prices on top of that, and you're not building a utopia. You're writing an eviction notice for half the country. Maher's point couldn't be clearer. Copy Canada. And you don't get affordable living? You get priced out of your own front door?
And because of mortgage debt, Canada has the highest debt-to-GDP ratio of any G7 nation. I don't know what that means, but it sounds bad. So does their vaunted healthcare system, which ranks dead last among high-income countries in access to primary health care and ability to see a doctor in a day or two. And it's not for lack of spending. Of the 30 countries with universal coverage, Canada spends over 13% of its economy on it, which is a lot of money for free health care.
Canada's problems are turning out to be far bigger than the liberal cheerleaders ever imagined, and the cracks in their so-called utopia are spreading faster than they'd like to admit. And here's the kicker, Bill Maher isn't some conservative firebrand waving a partisan flag. He's a liberal, someone the left once proudly embraced as one of their own. That's exactly what makes his criticism sting so much. If a guy like Maher is calling out Canada, maybe the fantasy isn't just cracked, it's shattered. But Maher isn't ranting for the sake of making noise. He's holding up a mirror to America, flashing that trademark sarcastic grin, and essentially asking, you really want this blueprint here? Because if Canada's the model, get ready for sky-high housing costs, broken promises, and a whole lot of regret. And the best part? Maher's just getting started. The roast has only begun.
Look, I'm not saying Canada still isn't a great country. It is, but those aren't paradise numbers. If Canada was an apartment, the lead feature might be America adjacent. And if America was a rental car, Canada would be America or similar. And again, honestly, Canada, I'm not saying any of this because I enjoy it. I don't, because I've always enjoyed you. But I need to cite you as a cautionary tale to help my country. And the moral of that tale is, yes, you can move too far left. And when you do, you wind up pushing the people in the middle to the right.
Is Bill Maher confessing to a political conversion? Has he suddenly crossed over to the right? Not quite. What we're seeing is the natural outcome of drifting too far into leftist la-la land. When the left becomes so extreme that even lifelong liberals can't stomach it anymore, the pendulum inevitably swings back. Many of these so-called defectors aren't embracing conservatism. They're just waking up to the chaos. Take Joe Rogan, once celebrated as the cool, countercultural voice of progressives. Now, he's branded right-wing simply for questioning woke dogma. Or Elon Musk, a man who literally builds electric cars and rockets. Not exactly a conservative resume. Yet the left's meltdown has shoved him into the center-right box too. Maher single quotes, "S no different." He hasn't changed who he is, his principles are the same. It's the left that sprinted so far off the ideological cliff that anyone standing still suddenly looks conservative by comparison.
At its worst, Canada is what American voters think happens when there's no one putting a check on extreme wokeness. Like the saga of Canadian shop teacher Kayla Lemieux, whose pronouns are she, her, and those. Kayla is now back to being a guy named Kerry, but 2 years ago, when they showed up to teach children, the progressive high school they taught at said that they, the school, not the person. Really, you couldn't have found another word. We were using that one. Anyway, okay. They were committed to a safe environment for gender expression. Safe for who? What about the children?
Frankly, this is what happens when ideology starts replacing common sense. The more society chases symbolism over substance, the more confusion follows. Take what's happening in some Canadian classrooms, education giving way to theatrics, where identity debates overshadow actual learning. Students are caught in the middle, unsure what's real and what's performance. When clarity gives way to chaos, nobody wins, least of all the next generation, and this isn't some distant social experiment. It's happening in the very country America's progressives keep holding up as their shining example. Canada, the so-called model of modern liberalism, is struggling under the weight of its own contradictions. Behind the polite branding and maple syrup gloss lie sky-high housing prices, identity politics run amok, and government policies that often seem more performative than practical. Yet the American left keeps gazing north like starry-eyed dreamers, convinced Canada is living out the progressive paradise they've always wanted. But peel back the surface, and what you see isn't utopia, it's a mix of debt, dysfunction, and delusion. Bill Maher's message couldn't be clearer. Before liberals demand America copy Canada, they might want to take a hard look at what's really happening there. Spoiler alert, it's not the fantasy they've been selling.
And this is why people vote for Trump. They say in politics, liberals are the gas pedal and conservatives are the brakes. And I'm generally with the gas pedal, but not if we're driving off a cliff. On the trans issue, America is no ands, ifs, or buts about it, absolutely alone in the world now, an outlier country. Last month, England's National Health Service announced that there's not enough evidence to support the safety or clinical effectiveness of puberty blockers for third graders.
Maher is absolutely right. Trump didn't win out of nowhere. His rise wasn't some political fluke. It was a reaction. Millions of Americans, not just conservatives but centrists and even longtime liberals, had simply had enough. Enough of the endless moral grandstanding, enough of the cancel culture, and enough of a Democratic Party that seemed more obsessed with identity battles than real-world solutions. By the time the Democratic National Committee turned itself into a carnival of virtue signaling, countless voters were ready to jump ship. It wasn't just the right rolling their eyes, moderates and independents were too. Even young voters, the very group Democrats assumed would always be theirs, started pushing back. They didn't want to trade freedom of thought for ideological conformity. Somewhere along the way, the DNC stopped feeling like a political party and started feeling like a scolding lecture. But here's the thing, Americans don't vote for lectures, they vote for leadership. And when the left forgot that, they didn't just lose the middle. They gift-wrapped the White House for Donald Trump.
So too with all the other good place countries, in direct opposition to America's choice to affirm children's wishes on switching gender, no matter the age or psychiatric history. The far left, which always like to use, well, Europe does it. Yeah, no, that doesn't work on this one anymore.
Here's the irony the woke crowd rarely acknowledges. Many of the very countries they hold up as models of progress aren't following America's lead on everything. In fact, some of the most famously progressive nations, Sweden, Finland, and the United Kingdom, have taken a far more cautious approach when it comes to gender-related medical treatments for minors. After reviewing the data and outcomes, these governments decided to scale back or limit such procedures until patients reach adulthood, prioritizing long-term evidence and child welfare over political pressure. These are not conservative nations. They're among the most socially liberal societies in the world. But they chose prudence over ideology, basing policy on research rather than rhetoric. Meanwhile, in the US, much of the left continues to frame these debates as a simple test of moral virtue, as if the rest of the world is fully aligned with their stance. Spoiler alert, it's not. Even the countries most celebrated for their progressive values are rethinking where activism ends and accountability begins.
Or on immigration. Sweden opened its borders to over 1.5 million immigrants since 2010, and now 20% of its citizens are foreign-born, and its education system is tanking.
And here's where the irony really hits. The same woke activists who love to lecture America about following the world's example never seem to mention that a lot of those countries don't even agree with them. Some of the most progressive nations on the planet, Sweden, Finland, and the United Kingdom, have actually pulled back on medical interventions for minors, choosing caution over ideology. After years of study, they've decided to limit or postpone certain treatments until adulthood, putting data and child welfare ahead of activist demands. These aren't conservative strongholds. They're the global gold standard for social liberalism. Yet even they saw the risks and said, "Hold on, let's slow this down." Meanwhile, here in the US, the left keeps pretending the entire developed world is marching in lockstep with their agenda. Spoiler alert, it's not. Even the so-called enlightened nations are realizing that science should lead politics, not the other way around.